Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about Retribution Paladins, and specifically about Final Verdict. It's been a while since I did a Ret Paladin video, and I've just gotten the chance to use this in a PvE setting recently here, and it is quite good for its job, right? So I wanted to kind of go over that with you. I went over Magistrate's Judgment, specifically for Kyrian. However, Final Verdict, this is one that's pretty good for pretty much anybody in any covenant and for straight single target, right? So this has always been a PvP legendary. It does really good for PvP. Can't be disarmed with it. So you might already have this crafted and might not even think to use it in PvE. For me, what happened was this is the fourth one that I've crafted at max level. And for me, what happened was I got a ring in the raid this week, and I mostly took it. It was upgrading a 220 to 226, but it was going to go into my Magistrate's Judgment slot, which is on my ring, and which is what I use for most situations. And then I was going to be able to, for AoE situations where I'm using Divine Tempest or the Divine Storm legendary, it would allow me to put a better ring in there and just be a slight upgrade. Well, since it is for swapping out legendaries, I decided to run a sim with Final Verdict as well. And I had just gotten it, last week or whenever I had gotten it somewhat recently. I hadn't really thought to try to use it in PvE just because I enjoy Magistrate's Judgment gameplay a lot. So I hadn't really thought to use it that much. I knew it was a slight buff because they retooled some of the legendaries, quite a few hotfixes, like maybe a month ago, maybe more than a month ago. And I knew that Final Verdict was buffed and that was probably the best single target one, but probably not by that much. However, it was a pretty decent amount. A 300 for me, it was like 3 to 350 DPS upgrade for straight single target. So that's the important thing to talk about with Final Verdict is this is for only single target. If you're going to be using Divine Storm at all, it's really not that useful. So it's extremely niche, right? So in most times in Arena, you're not going to be using Divine Storm. It's not going to be super useful, especially like let's say you're doing twos and you're facing two range players. You're never going to cast Divine Storm. Most people aren't going to ever cast Divine Storm in Arena anyways, but in battlegrounds it's possible that you would, if there's 5 people and you had wings up or something. I'm not saying you should, but it is possible that you could do that in epic BGs and stuff. Of course you might try to AoE down people, but so this is for only single target. It has no benefit if you're using Divine Storm because it doesn't do anything for Divine Storm at all. So for me, I would say even if you're going to cast it one time, you really want to use your Final Verdict. However, there are 3 raid fights where this is really kind of handy. That's Shriekwing. Now you don't need any help killing Shriekwing probably, but maybe you do. Maybe you are a heroic guild just starting Mythic, for example. You might need help with Mythic Shriekwing if you are just getting started into Mythic. So he's all by himself. You're never going to need to cast Divine Storm. Artificer Zymox. Now if people get trapped in a stasis trap, you could technically AoE them, but I would just say if you're using your Final's Verdict, just either Final Verdict them and kill it really fast, or just keep Final Verdict in the boss and let other people cleave it down. And then also for Sludge Fist, which is really good because of the pillars, right? So these fights in particular, Final Verdict will be quite strong on, as it'll be your best single target. I'm pretty sure for every Covenant, although I know for Venthyr it's even closer to their Mad Paragon. I went over my belt because that's where my slot is for my Mad Paragon. But Mad Paragon is still really good for Venthyr either way, but you still might get some extra single target from Final Verdict if you want to sim that. Of course, you always have to sim your character. You could have some random build. You could have some random build that ends up being, because it's so unique, because Crusade is really good for you or something, and ends up beating Final Verdict or something. But in most situations, especially for those 3 fights that I mentioned in the raid, Final Verdict is definitely going to be the way to go. Some other things to talk about really is this is extremely niche, so you're only going to want to craft this if you have extra Soul Ash sitting around, you keep doing your Torghast. Like I said, it was my fourth one. If it would have gotten buffed earlier, I probably would have made it earlier. But it was the fourth one that I made personally, and so it was a little bit late down the line, and maybe you don't want to waste Soul Ash because you're hoping it carries over to the next patch. I get all that, but if you are interested in parsing those fights, or you're stuck on those fights in progression for any reason, it's definitely good to make. I use it in the Maw now that I have it, because in the Maw I don't typically pull multiple things, and I'm killing either like the skulls or the rare spawns, or just the thing I have to kill for the quest or whatever, and like elites or whatever. And so for single target, obviously, still really, really good. Now, if you get to a point in the Maw where you need to be casting Divine Storm a lot, then it might not be as good. But for me, it's been extremely helpful in that as well, just making it just a little bit quicker. When the Maw feels like such a pain in the butt, taking a minute or two off of your time can really feel better about it when you don't really want to be there. Another option to use it in would be Torghast, but only if everything is easy to you in the gear that you have, except for like the final bosses. So whether it's the final boss on a floor, the final boss of the whole thing, of the entire run, or like a twisting corridor type thing where the bosses are giving you trouble only. Again, this will help with your single target damage, and yeah, should help out overall. The other thing I wanted to mention is for your soul binds, for your conduits, at least simulate Templar's Vindication with your finals verdict. For me, this increased my DPS by a decent amount. Instead of running, since I'm carrying, I have to run Ringing Clarity, but instead of running Virtuous Command, I simulated that against Templar's Vindication. Templar's Vindication was quite stronger for me. Again, that's my stats, my setup. I'm very haste mastery oriented in my gear and my gems and everything like that. So that's what it is for me. Don't mind my crappy levels on my conduits. I've put up almost all my Stygia into gem slots instead of into these, which may or may not be a mistake. I don't know. I seem to be doing fine, but yeah. So Templar's Vindication simulated much better for me personally, so at least try that out if you're thinking about using Final Verdict for PvE content. At least try out that conduit with it to see if that makes it pull ahead. If you're Venthyr, or if you're any Covenant but Kyrian, you might be just using that anyways, so it might only apply to Kyrian. For Kyrian specifically, since that's what I am, nothing changes really in your rotation or anything like that. You just want to make sure you definitely get off all of your Templar's verdicts or your final verdicts into your execution sentence. That's the biggest difference. Is there's times where, because like let's say you're running Magistrate's Judgment, which a lot of Kyrians are, there'll be times where you get so many procs that you're just pumping everything into it, and at least me, I'm sure there's people that are better than me that don't do this, but you know, I might accidentally use a Blade of Justice instead of or I might use a Judgment, right? Let's do it this way. I use a Judgment or a Hammer of Wrath, and then I'm one holy power short of a verdict, and then I have to use another ability, and then I don't get off the verdict into the execution sentence. And that only happens because you don't know exactly, I mean, unless you're tracking your buffs actively, which some people probably have weak auras for. It's hard to plan ahead of time what you're going to press when you have these procs, and I usually play with the Fires of Justice as well when I'm running Magistrate's Judgment. So I have multiple things with the Judgment and then the Crusader Strike that can proc it. And so without knowing all the holy power, sometimes I do that. For this, it's really important. You're going to know the holy power, so it shouldn't be difficult by any means to do. But you just want to really make sure that you get, I don't know if it's 3 or 4 final verdicts into your execution sentence. But for me, so like at max gear, your execution sentence should be hitting for like 40k, for example, right? At max gear, maybe more. I don't, if you're more optimal talent or that, and that's without like raid buffs and stuff. So it'd be higher with raid buffs. But just flat, no buffs, your execution sentence should be hitting for like 40k with final verdict on, somewhere in max gear, right? So pretty strong, formidably strong. And you know, some of the I've hit much higher than that as well, but that's probably about the average, and that's like It obviously doesn't crit, but that's with like maybe 1 crit into it instead of 2 or 3. But that's what you want to be looking for there, and it is quite powerful. It's very good sustained damage. It has a cool animation, if that means anything to you. But yeah, I just want to do a little bit of review on this legendary because I just started using it. Like I said, I made it for PvP. This is my last legendary. Well, I could still possibly make a prot one for PvP as well, but I made this with the idea of it being my last legendary of the patch for PvP, but it sims better. So when I'm doing those 3 fights, we still re-clear. We don't just extend. Even though I don't have cutting edge yet, we still re-clear. So every week I'll use this on Shriekwing, I'll use it on Artificer, and then I'll use it on Sledge Fist and try to pump out some damage. So just wanted to get this little bit of almost a review out there for it, and let people know that it is a really good legendary, and it's just really niche. So you decide if the DPS increase is worth it to you. I do ask you, however, to subscribe to the channel because that helps me out so much. And other than that, everybody have a good one.